Barron Trump saves his mum Melania Trump from shooter. The grand ballroom of the New York Gala shimmered under golden chandeliers, filled with dignitaries, celebrities, and high-profile guests. Melania Trump, dressed in an elegant white gown, stood poised as always, engaging in polite conversation. Barron, now taller than most men in the room, stood at her side, exuding a quiet strength that many had underestimated. Secret Service agents were stationed at every entrance, their eyes constantly scanning the crowd for any threats. Everything seemed normal. Until it wasn't. From the corner of his eye, Barron noticed a man moving strangely. He was dressed in a black suit, but something about him felt off. His hands were clenched. He wasn't mingling like the others. Barron's instincts sharpened. Then, the flicker of a gun. A gloved hand reached into the jacket, the unmistakable shape of a firearm flashing beneath the fabric. Time slowed. Barron didn't think. He reacted. "Get down." With a force that surprised even himself, Barron grabbed Melania and tackled her to the ground, shielding her with his own body. The gunman's weapon was drawn. A single shot rang out. Chaos erupted. People screamed. The Secret Service lunged forward. The gunman's arm was grabbed, twisted, but it was too late. The bullet had already been fired. Barron squeezed his eyes shut, waiting for pain. But he felt nothing. A deafening silence followed. When he opened his eyes, he saw the bullet lodged in the marble pillar inches away from where his mother had been standing. The gunman was already being wrestled to the ground, his weapon kicked away. Secret Service agents flooded the room, securing the area, shouting commands. But Barron wasn't thinking about that. His focus was on his mother. Melania was beneath him, eyes wide, her hands gripping his arms. "Barron?" Her voice was breathless, frantic. "Are you okay?" Barron exhaled, nodding quickly. "I'm fine. Are you hurt?" Melania shook her head, her eyes full of shock and something else, something deeper. Then, without warning, she pulled him into a tight embrace. "You saved me," she whispered. Barron felt the adrenaline still coursing through his veins. He had never seen his mother like this before, shaken but holding on to him as if he was her lifeline. "I just did what Dad would have done," he murmured. Melania pulled back, placing a hand on his cheek. "No, Barron. You did what a hero would have done." The room was still a blur of movement, shouts, and flashing cameras. The air smelled of gunpowder, and the echo of the gunshots still rang in Barron's ears. But none of it mattered. All that mattered was that his mother was safe. Melania was gripping his arms so tightly that her nails dug into his suit jacket. She wasn't crying. Melania Trump never let emotions break her composure in public, but there was a rawness in her eyes, a silent terror that only a mother could feel after nearly losing her child. The Secret Service moved swiftly, dragging the gunman out of the ballroom. More agents swarmed Barron and Melania, their voices firm yet controlled. "Sir, we need to evacuate you immediately." "Ma'am, please come with us." Barron held onto his mother's hand as they were hurried toward the exit. He could feel every single eye in the room on them. Some people were still frozen in shock. Others had their phones out, already recording the moment. And then the murmurs started. "He saved her. Did you see that?" He tackled her before the shot went off. Barron Trump just saved his mother's life. Barron wasn't focused on any of it. His mind was still in fight mode. His heart was racing, his body still coiled with adrenaline, ready to react again if necessary. They were rushed through a private corridor, heading for the security exit. The cold night air hit them as they stepped outside, but Barron barely felt it. His mother still hadn't let go of his hand. Secret Service agents surrounded them, forming a moving shield as they approached the presidential SUV. Barron helped his mother into the car before climbing in after her. The doors slammed shut, locking them in a bubble of silence. Only then did Melania finally exhale, a shaky breath escaping her lips. She turned to Barron, taking his face in her hands. "You," she stopped, gathering herself. "You could have been killed." Barron swallowed. "So could you." Melania's grip tightened. "You threw yourself in front of me." Without hesitation, Barron met her gaze. "Of course I did." She exhaled sharply, her expression unreadable. You are your father's son. Barron didn't know what to say to that. He had always been compared to his father, but never in this way. Never with this kind of pride. The SUV pulled away from the gala, tires screeching as they sped toward safety. The radio crackled with updates from the security team. The shooter has been identified. Barron glanced up. Who was he? One of the lead agents turned in his seat. An activist. And a Trump online manifesto. Planned this for weeks. Melania's lips pressed into a thin line. And his motive? He wanted to make a statement. He thought taking out a member of your family would be enough. Barron's jaw clenched. A statement? This man had tried to kill his mother for a statement? The thought made his stomach twist with rage. Melania reached for his hand again, squeezing it gently. We are safe now, she said softly. But Barron wasn't thinking about safety. He was thinking about what could have happened if he hadn't reacted in time. He turned back to his mother. What happens next? Melania's eyes darkened. Now, she said. Now the world will talk. And talk they did. By the time they reached the Trump residence, the internet had exploded. Every major news network was running the story. Every angle of the incident had been captured. The moment Barron had tackled Melania to the ground. The exact second the bullet had missed by inches. The sheer shock and terror in the faces of the people in the ballroom. And then there were the headlines. Heroic. Barron Trump saves his mother from assassination attempt. Barron Trump's brave act leaves America stunned. The moment Barron Trump became a man, Melania scrolled through the news on her phone, her expression unreadable. Barron sat across from her in their private lounge, still processing everything. His phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Messages from people he hadn't spoken to in years. Texts from classmates. Emails from journalists. Even world leaders were reaching out to praise his bravery. He wasn't used to this. He wasn't used to being the center of a global moment. His mother finally spoke. This will change things for you. Barron looked up. How? Melania set her phone down. People will see you differently now. Not just as my son. Not just as your father's son. But as someone who acted when it mattered most. Barron let her words sink in. He had spent his entire life being watched, analyzed, compared. But this was different. For the first time, he wasn't just part of a political dynasty. He had made his own moment. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. A Secret Service agent stepped inside. Sir, ma'am, the president is on the line. Melania exchanged a glance with Barron before taking the phone. Donald. Barron could hear his father's voice through the speaker. Are you all right? Melania's eyes flicked toward Barron. Yes. Thanks to him. There was a pause on the other end. But I always knew he'd be a fighter. Barron swallowed hard. His father had never been one to show softness. Praise was rare. But tonight, something had changed. Melania handed the phone to Barron. He hesitated for just a second before taking it. Dad, you okay, kid? Barron exhaled. Yeah. A beat of silence. Then, in a voice filled with something unspoken, his father said, I'm proud of you. Barron's throat tightened. He wasn't sure why, but the words hit harder than he expected. I just did what I had to do, he murmured. That's what being a leader is, his father replied. You did good today. Barron didn't know what to say. So he just nodded. Thanks, Dad. They hung up. Melania was watching him carefully. What? He asked. She smiled softly. Nothing. But he knew what she was thinking. Tonight, everything had changed. He wasn't just the son of a president. He was his own man now. And for the first time in his life, Barron Trump felt ready for whatever came next. The weight of the night's events settled on Barron as he sat back in his chair, staring at his reflection in the window. The city lights flickered in the distance, oblivious to what had just happened. Inside, the Trump residence was quiet, too quiet. His phone still buzzed with notifications, but he ignored them. The world was talking, but he wasn't ready to listen. Melania had left the room to take more security briefings, and Barron was finally alone with his thoughts. For the first time, the adrenaline had worn off. Now, all that was left was the reality of what had just happened. He had saved his mother's life. That should have been enough. But deep down, something about the whole situation still didn't sit right with him. Who is this guy? The media was already spinning their own narratives, but Barron needed to know the truth. He grabbed the remote, switching on the news. The first thing he saw was his own face, replayed over and over in slow motion, the moment he pulled Melania to safety frozen in time. The chirun at the bottom of the screen read, "Who is the shooter?" Attack on Melania Trump raises questions. Barron leaned forward, listening. Law enforcement sources have confirmed that the suspect is 38-year-old Jeremy Lasker, an outspoken political activist with a history of making threats against high-profile figures online. FBI investigators are now combing through his past to determine whether he acted alone or if this was part of a larger coordinated attack. A larger coordinated attack. Barron frowned. That didn't sound like some lone lunatic acting on impulse. Something wasn't adding up. His phone vibrated again, but this time it was a direct message from an unknown number. At first, he ignored it. Then curiosity got the better of him. He opened it. It's not over. He wasn't working alone. Barron's heart stopped. He stared at the message, rereading it over and over. His fingers hovered over the screen. Who had sent this? How had they gotten his number? And more importantly, was this a warning? His first instinct was to tell his mother, or maybe the Secret Service. But something in his gut told him to wait, to think. If this wasn't over, then who was next? His mother? His father? Barron locked his phone and stood up. He had spent his entire life being protected by others. But tonight had changed things. Tonight, he wasn't going to just sit back and let someone else handle it. He was going to find out the truth. Meanwhile, in a high-security facility across town, Jeremy Lasker sat in an interrogation room, hands cuffed to the table. He hadn't spoken a word since his arrest. 2 FBI agents watched him from behind a glass window. "What do you think?" one of them muttered. "Is he just some crazy guy looking for attention, or is there something more here?" The other agent studied Lasker's cold, empty stare. "I don't know," he admitted. "But I do know one thing." The first agent turned to him. "What's that?" The second agent exhaled. "He's not scared." That fact alone sent a chill through the room. Because if Lasker wasn't afraid, then that meant one thing. He knew something they didn't. Back at the Trump residence, Barron paced the floor of his room, trying to make sense of everything. The message, the news reports, the shooter's blank stare as he was dragged away. It all felt connected. His instincts told him there was more to this than anyone realized. His mother thought they were safe. The Secret Service thought the threat was neutralized. But Barron wasn't convinced. He pulled up the message again. It's not over. He wasn't working alone. Who was behind this? And more importantly, what were they planning next? Barron had spent years avoiding the public eye. He had let the world make assumptions about him, that he was quiet, soft, just a kid living in his father's shadow. But not anymore. This was personal now. And if someone thought they could come after his family and walk away, they were dead wrong. The room felt smaller than it was, the weight of the night pressing down on Barron like a heavy cloak. He stared at his phone, the cryptic message glowing on the screen. It's not over. He wasn't working alone. His mind raced with possibilities. Who had sent this? Was it someone trying to help? Or was it a threat? His instincts told him that whoever was behind this wanted him to know something, but not everything. He knew he should go to the Secret Service, should let them handle it. But something inside him said no, not yet. Because if this really wasn't over, then the people who had set this in motion were still out there. And they were still watching. In the dimly lit interrogation room across town, Jeremy Lasker remained silent. The 2 FBI agents who had been watching him earlier finally stepped inside, their movements slow and deliberate. They had interrogated hundreds of men like him before, fanatics, extremists, assassins. But there was something about Lasker that was different. He wasn't afraid. The senior agent sat across from him, placing a thick file on the table. He flipped it open, revealing printed screenshots of Lasker's online activity, threats, radical messages, encrypted communications. "We know who you are, Jeremy." The agent's voice was calm, measured. "We know what you were planning. What we don't know is who you were working with." Lasker slowly lifted his gaze, a smirk playing at the corners of his lips. You think you stopped something tonight? He said, his voice low. You didn't. The younger agent stiffened. Who else is involved? Lasker let out a slow exhale. That's the wrong question. The senior agent narrowed his eyes. Then what's the right question? Lasker's smirk widened. Who's next? Back at the Trump residence, Barron felt his pulse quicken. He had read the message a dozen times, trying to make sense of it. Was it a warning? A challenge? Whoever had sent it had gone through the trouble of encrypting their number. This wasn't some random conspiracy theorist looking for attention. This was calculated. He had to talk to someone who could help him break this down. But who? Not the Secret Service, not yet. If there was another attack being planned, he needed information before it reached them. Then it hit him. There was only one person who could help him decode something like this. He picked up his phone and scrolled through his contacts. After a few seconds, he found the name he was looking for. He tapped the screen. The phone rang once, twice. Then a familiar voice answered. Barron, it's me, he said quickly. I need a favor. The pause. This sounds serious. Barron exhaled. It is. Inside a hidden tech lab in Washington, D.C., a young hacker named Ethan Grayson leaned back in his chair, adjusting his glasses. Ethan was a cyber intelligence expert, recruited by Barron's father years ago to help with security operations. But he and Barron had become friends in secret. Unlike most of the people in Barron's life, Ethan didn't treat him like a trump. He treated him like a person. And right now, Barron needed that more than ever. I just sent you something, Barron said, his voice steady but urgent. I need to know where it came from. Ethan cracked his knuckles. Let me guess, this has something to do with what went down tonight? Barron didn't answer. Ethan didn't need him to. He was already typing, lines of code flashing across multiple monitors as he ran a deep trace on the anonymous message. After a few minutes, Ethan let out a low whistle. Barron? What? This number. It was routed through a dozen fake servers. Ethan paused. Someone really didn't want to be found. Barron clenched his jaw. But can you trace it? Ethan hesitated. It's going to take time. Barron exhaled. Then start now. Meanwhile, in the FBI's secured facility, Agent Carter sat across from Jeremy Lasker, watching him carefully. What do you mean, who's next? Carter asked. Lasker leaned forward, resting his cuffed hands on the table. You really think I was the only one? The younger agent stepped in. If you know something, you need to tell us. Right now. Lasker smiled, a slow, knowing grin. You think I'm scared? He said. You think I care what happens to me? Agent Carter studied him. Lasker was too calm, too controlled. Carter had seen this before. This wasn't a man who had failed. This was a man who knew something bigger was coming. And that meant they were already running out of time. At the Trump residence, Barron's phone vibrated. Ethan's name flashed on the screen. He answered immediately. Tell me you have something. Ethan's voice was tight. I found a pattern. Barron's grip on the phone tightened. Go on. The message you got? It wasn't sent by one person. Barron frowned. What do you mean? Ethan's voice was serious. This was sent through a group network. A dark web channel with multiple encrypted users. That means... Barron finished his sentence for him. There are more of them. Ethan nodded. And they're still active? Barron's stomach twisted. The attack tonight wasn't just a statement. It was the beginning. He had just stepped into something much bigger than himself. And now he had no choice but to stop it. Barron took a deep breath, steadying himself. His mind was racing, but he couldn't afford to lose focus now. The weight of the truth pressed down on him. This wasn't over. More people were involved. And if Ethan was right, they weren't just random extremists. They were organized. He needed more information. Can you access their network? Barron asked. Ethan hesitated. I can try, but it's dangerous. These guys aren't amateurs. If I get caught snooping, they'll know someone is onto them. Barron exhaled. Just get as much as you can. We don't have time. Understood. Ethan's keyboard clattered as he worked. But Barron, if they're watching, that means they could be planning something else. Something bigger. Barron's stomach tightened. Then we find them before they make their next move. Meanwhile, at the FBI's high-security facility, Jeremy Lasker sat in his cell, smiling. A small, satisfied grin that sent a chill through the watching agents. Agent Carter had been through a lot in his career. He'd taken down terrorist cells, stopped assassination plots, and interrogated some of the most dangerous men in the world. But something about Lasker's confidence unsettled him. The way he wasn't afraid. The way he knew something. Carter turned to his partner. "Get cyber on the line. I want a full digital sweep. If this guy was working with others, we need to find them before they disappear." The younger agent nodded and left the room. Carter turned back to the security monitor, watching Lasker. He knew that look. Lasker was waiting for something, and whatever it wasn't good. Back at the Trump residence, Barron's phone vibrated again. Ethan's voice was sharp. "I found something." Barron stood up. "What?" "I traced the network back to a private server. This isn't just some small extremist group. This is an operation." Barron's jaw clenched. "How big?" Ethan hesitated. "Big enough that they're communicating in real time. They know Lasker was arrested. And Barron's breath caught. "What?" Ethan's voice dropped. "They're talking about you." Barron felt a chill run down his spine. This wasn't just about his mother anymore. Now he was a target too. The streets of Washington, D.C. hummed with life, unaware of the storm brewing beneath the surface. In a darkened apartment miles away, a man sat at his laptop, eyes scanning the encrypted chat. The messages flickered across the screen. "Lasker failed. Trump's kid interfered. We need to move faster. The FBI is already looking. We switch targets. Make it bigger." The man's fingers hovered over the keyboard before typing a single response. "Understood." Proceeding with Phase 2. He hit enter. And somewhere across the country, another attack was already being set in motion. Barron paced the room, his fists clenched. "Tell me everything," he said. Ethan sighed. "They're planning something else, but I can't see what. Their encryption is heavy. I can only catch bits and pieces." Barron's mind was racing. "Can you find where they are?" "I'm working on it," Ethan muttered. "But Barron, I think you need to tell the Secret Service. This is getting too big." Barron hesitated. He knew Ethan was right. But something deep inside him told him that if he let someone else take over, he'd never know the full truth. That whoever these people were, they wouldn't stop. And he needed to stop them first. "Give me a little more time," Barron said. Ethan groaned. "You're seriously trying to handle this yourself?" "I just need to know more." Ethan sighed. "Fine. But if anything happens..." "I'll be careful," Barron promised. But they both knew that wasn't true. Because Barron wasn't being careful. He was walking straight into a war. Somewhere in the city, in a dimly lit warehouse, a group of men sat around a table, watching a live feed of the news. The headline flashed, "Barron Trump saves his mother, hero or target?" One of the men scoffed. "They're treating him like some kind of hero." Another man leaned forward. "He's a problem now. He's watching us." Silence. Then the leader of the group spoke. "Then we eliminate the problem." A chilling pause. Then a single question. "How soon can we move?" Back at the Trump residence, Barron sat in the dark, staring at his phone. He knew he was being watched. And now he knew they were coming. He exhaled, his heart pounding. Let them come. Because this time, he was ready.